Thanks for tuning back into the channel. This is the third video on my 1942 Farmall M restoration project. Here's a quick recap of what we've done so far, and then we'll get right back into the transmission and engine assembly. There we go. Reuse. That race there, see it spins a little bit, but that's not good. I already have the new inner axle bearing and the differential carrier on, so now we can slide the axle in, get the outer bearing on. Got some retaining compound on there. Nice and smooth. There's zero up and down play. Before there was a noticeable amount. You could hear it clicking up and down. Got this axle completely installed. Finished the seal. Still have to do the seal on the other axle, but I want to put the brake cross shaft seals in now. I like to put a little bit of Sil Glide or another silicone grease to help hold the spring on the lip of the seal. There we go. So the problem we're gonna have here is this outer hole is worn, so the race is spinning on the new bearing. So an old trick for keeping a race from spinning is taking a center punch and going all the way around, making divots in that bore, and it will raise the surface in those spots, and that will help lock the race in. See the punch marks all the way around, and we're not sliding in there easily. Perfect. Now we can put that rear bearing on. Here's the retaining compound. Put a little bit on the shaft and on the outer race. So I actually made a mistake here. This bearing is not supposed to have a snap ring on it. There's a snap ring on the end of the shaft that actually keeps that bearing in place, but it's no big deal. You can just take the snap ring off and it works fine. I don't have that bearing in all the way yet, but because it's not aligned, so I need to put the front bearing in. Again, retaining compound. Finally have all the bearings for this transmission. I already got this big one installed on the input shaft, as well as the inner race for this pilot bearing, which is also new. And of course that new one. And then this other one for the input shaft. This bearing fits in here way too easily. The old one was spinning in the bore, which wore it down a little bit, and you can see kind of that lip. So I'm going to do the same thing I did for the other parts of the transmission. Punch marks all the way around and plenty of retaining compound. Get a little retaining compound. Get this spacer. Now we can install this pinion shaft. This is going to be pretty heavy now, but we need these shims. Don't mess up the shims. Dang it. I think these two gears have to move back one. Alright, I have a little bit of silicone on that surface. Made a new gasket as well. So now everything except for the PTO should be in this transmission, so let's go through the gears. Starting out here, we have reverse, first, second, third, fourth, and direct drive, which is fifth. And we're going to be using the Chevron Delo 80W90, and this transmission holds 13 gallons, so let's start dumping it in.
Huge thank you to Ocean State Oil and Chevron for donating all the lubricants used in this video. The gear oil, engine oil, grease, everything.
Make sure you put the drain plug in before pouring the oil in. The plug to check the oil levels on the side of the block, on the side of the transmission here. It's about 11.5 gallons and we're right at the full mark. Make sure all the gears are in neutral and the shift lever's in neutral so the forks line up. What the heck? Alright, I got all the shift forks in their spots. The dowel pins are lined up. Gasket looks good. Looks good. Okay, got the brakes on. Finished that up last night with the pedals. Still have to put one bolt in on this pedal, but the brakes seem to work. And I'll put the springs on probably after we paint the tractor. Now we're going to put the hubs on. I'm gonna put a little grease on the shaft to help slide the hub on, and also so it doesn't get seized on here. Hold on. The rod broke.
When? The one they just started using?
Okay. Alright, getting ready to put the bell housing on, but first I want to put part of this coupler on the input shaft. I cut new rubber pieces to go here because the old ones were very compressed and worn out. So now I'm just going to use some Loctite on these bolts because we do not want them shaking loose. Then I'm going to put the input shaft bolts to here, but I'm going to put that on after putting the engine on. Alright, there's the bell housing, ready to go onto the case.
Let me take a picture.
For the throwout bearing, carrier, don't have to go crazy with grease here. That's probably too much, but definitely want some grease here. Now you can.
How come the PTO lever doesn't move?
And there you go. Alright, now let's look closer at the heads and figure out what we have to move from the old one to the new one. These studs that hold down the rocker cover, this fitting, then this one on the other end. You can see there's that one that goes at an angle. The other end, there's nothing there, so we have to plug that line that goes up over the top and feeds the rockers. Alright, I have the head on the table now, just lift it up with some 2x4s so that we can lap these valves. Alright, lapping valves is pretty easy. It's a little time consuming though. So you need some lapping compound on the valve. A little goes a long way. A little bit of oil on the valve guide in there. And you could take one of these suction cup deals, or you can put a drill on the end of the valve or just spin the end of the valve like that. It's important to lift it up every every so often, and that is what kind of helps suck the compound back in. If I were lapping a valve that was pretty rough, or a seat that was rough, I would go longer. And right there, that's what you want. Nice gray line, consistent all the way around.
So, why do I have this brand new head? Well, more power. That's the main reason. This is a head that's designed for a Farmall 450 liquid propane engine. So the bolt pattern and the shape is the same as the head on the M400 450 Super M. This one just has much smaller combustion chambers, which is going to raise the compression, and also the ports for the intake and exhaust are going to flow much better. So it's a little bit of a better design, a lot more compression, means more power.
So I already went ahead and put half of the springs and keepers on. Let's do the other half. It's pretty simple, as long as you have the right tool. These are super handy for doing valves. Just compress it, slip in the keepers, and you're all done. And they have these clips on the valves in case something happens with the retainer or the keepers, so they don't drop down into the cylinder. Make sure they're all seated. Now I like to shine a light in the ports and make sure there's no light. You can't see any light around the valves. So if those valves were leaking, you'd be able to see light around them. Now we can install the studs and this fitting. We got some thread sealant for this. Alright, now I'm gonna put a little oil on the threads and the base where the head bolts go, or where the head nuts go, and that'll help them torque up easier. Before we get too far ahead, here's the old spark plugs. Just gonna use these to protect, to keep from getting any debris down into the cylinders. Now I'm gonna torque these in 3 steps, starting at 40 foot-pounds. Now I'm gonna go to 90, and then the final is gonna be 110. I switched to the 1/2-inch torque wrench. Now I'm gonna go to 110, mark them with the red paint marker. I ordered 4 new studs, so let's get these ones that I installed too short out of here and install the longer ones. I remember why I didn't just get all new studs, because they're like 11 bucks each just for the stock ones. I should have just spent the money on nice ARP head studs. So these longer ones, they made two sizes on purpose. The longer ones are supposed to go here for this bracket for the throttle, but some of these seem to be threaded too far, or maybe I installed them too deep into the block, so it resulted in them being too low for the nut. And and probably between the old stud and the old nut being a little bit weaker, it just pulled the threads right out. Just double nut these to install them. So getting ready to take the engine off the stand here so we can put the adapter plate, clutch and flywheel and stuff on, and then put it on the tractor. Gonna have to move it from that bay to this one. Whenever I'm using one of these lifting fixtures, I count the amount of links so it's level. So now we can just make sure you're not hitting anything. It's kind of touching that, but that's not, you want to make sure you're not going to dent anything when you lift. It's touching there a little bit, but it's not going to hurt anything there. Job has to go into the garage more so we can close the door. It's gonna rain later. Usually pry bar works pretty good as long as you don't have too much weight in the front. Just like that, we have perfect access to put this stuff on. Here's the old clutch disc. It's pretty worn. There's not much left of these grooves, but it too could also have been reused. It's quite oil soaked, so that it might have slipped for a little. Here's the new disc. Here's a closer look at the flywheel. We didn't get it resurfaced, but it looks fine. I'll resurface it here real quick. And now our flywheel is nice and shiny. I'm gonna install the pilot bearing. Alright, now we can bolt this up onto the tractor. Got the flywheel on finally, and these get torqued to 90 foot-pounds. Now we have to figure out how to hold that flywheel. Now we can fold over these locking tabs and then put the pressure plate and clutch disc on. I'm just going to use the input shaft as a input shaft to make sure the clutch disc is aligned there. Ready to put the engine on. Just have to slide it forwards and bolt it. Here's the hardware. Let's get this input shaft bolted up. If you have the transmission in neutral, it's easy to line the shafts up. Frame rails are on, but all the bolts are loose. That way it's easier to put the front pedestal on, steering pedestal, because these can slide in and out a little bit. Alright, I just finished setting all the valves. I'm gonna have to reset them after we run the engine a little, because I'm gonna have to take the valve rack off to retorque the head bolts. This is just a breather pipe. Normally it would go all the way across, and there'd be another fitting there that goes up into the air cleaner, but this head is not drilled for that. So I just crimped it here, and that will be fine. And then for the valve cover gasket, since we want to be able to take this back off but not have it leak, I'm going to put silicone onto the head, and then on the other side just some grease. Now the grease on the other side, I like to use a silicone based grease. Don't forget your copper washers here. Alright, I got the water pump on already last night. Now I'm gonna put the upper housing here, and I have a new piece of 1.5" hose. Already have the hose taped off because I don't like getting paint on the hoses. I think it looks better without paint on them. I don't know. So we have the sheet metal on here temporarily just to test fit. This is the second time I've test fitted the sheet metal. Just want to make sure all of the hood latches line up. There's nothing bent or any weird things interfering. Want to make sure the air cleaner's in the right spot. The gauges are going to line up. The whole of the top lines up. The fitment here is good. I had to make one new latch here. The old one was kind of bent and wouldn't move. Also make sure your radiator's not, your alternator's not hitting, and there's going to be rubber spacers under the gas tank, but I don't have them, so I just have those washers. So I'll write down some notes on things I have to change before putting it together. Now the chassis is all ready to be painted. A couple little parts over here. So let's get this knocked out.
24 hours later.
I already took most of the tape off and the gas tank so we can get the stuff in here easier. Now I'm putting on the manifold. I already have the studs installed with little anti-seize and the gaskets.